So as you guys know, if it wasn't obvious already, given I have an entire channel dedicated around this, I am a huge Bulls fan, and I'm always reading articles, looking up statistics on the Bulls, because outside of work and my family, it's the one thing I enjoy doing most. So when I came across this tweet from NBC Sports Chicago with this graphic, and the tweet read, "Settle this debate," I thought this would be a good video topic, and that's what I want to talk about in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. So I'm sure some of you saw this graphic if you follow NBC Sports Chicago, and I would love to get your thoughts on it as well, because whenever you see these player-team comparisons and who would win in these hypothetical scenarios, I don't even debate it further and say which team would actually win whenever I see Michael Jordan on one. Whatever team has Michael Jordan, that team is winning, case closed. But when you look at this one further, and apologies, I'm probably going to be keeping this graphic up for a while so that way it can be referenced, but when you look at this breakdown between these two teams, it makes the debate a lot harder, despite the bottom one having Michael Jordan, because clearly they strategically designed it so that MJ essentially got the lower tier Bulls players versus what was depicted in the other team, which I'll call Pippen's team, since in my opinion, he's the second greatest Bulls player of all time. Now, I think first and foremost, when you're debating these concocted teams, is, which era are we talking about that they would be playing basketball in? Are we talking about modern day NBA? Are they playing in the 90s, the early 2000s? When would it be? Well, let's say for the purposes of this video, the question is which team would win based on today's NBA that is predicated on heavy outside shooting, high octane offense, not as much focus on defense, and a need for floor spacing. Now, the other thing I don't really like about this breakdown between players is you have a lot of players who are playing out of position. I mean, Michael Jordan, first of all, not a small forward. Pippen, not a power forward, although I'm sure he could play that position. Same with Luol Deng, not a power forward. And then Rodman definitely isn't a center, although I suppose in today's NBA, which is what we're basing this on, you could argue that he would actually fit well as a small ball five, purely just based on how well he could rebound the ball. But again, let's say for argument's sake, these are the positions each player would play. Now, if we take a look at Scottie Pippen's team, I mean, this team is deadly, because I'm also basing this off of each player in their prime, on the Bulls. So MVP Derrick Rose, before getting injured, was an absolute monster in terms of what he was able to do on the court, in terms of his slashing ability, that quick step driving to the hoop. He had a decent mid-range jumper as well, and he could even knock down, three-pointers, especially in his MVP season. And he was a decent playmaker. I mean, he averaged over 8 assists per game in his MVP year. You pair him next to Zach Lavine in the backcourt, which we all know what he can do, a walking bucket that is a dynamic scorer and shooting from outside, but also, like Rose, has the ability to slash to the hoop and quickly beat his defender. So you have your offensive firepowers in Rose and Lavine. Then you combine that with some of the greatest defenders in Bulls history in Jimmy Butler, who, by the way, is also a great offensive player as well, arguably one of the Bulls' best two-way players of all time. You have Scottie Pippen, who is one of the best defenders of all time, not just in Bulls history, but in NBA history. And the same goes for Rodman, a Defensive Player of the Year, one of the greatest rebounders ever, and of course his energy was unmatched. So this is an incredibly talented team, because you have the perfect mix of offense and defense. I would say, the one area that they're probably lacking a bit, as a floor general that could manage this team, which Rose can do. I mean, he was great at doing that in his MVP season, but I do think that this team would be a bit challenged in managing the offense and keeping the pace and flow, as well as the communication on the court. Then you look at Jordan's team. I mean, don't get me wrong, these are all great players, some of them Chicago greats, but aside from Michael Jordan, these guys don't match up well against the players in Pippen's team. I mean, Heinrich, a great player, one of my favorite Bulls players, a scrappy defender, and also a good three-point shooter and a decent facilitator, but he's no match for prime Derrick Rose. Ben Gordon, I mean, again, another good player, great scorer, not the best defender. He doesn't match up to Lavine at all. Obviously, Michael Jordan, the greatest player to ever play the game, is what sets this team apart in terms of the other positions. And then, Luol Deng, an incredible defender, and actually another great two-way player, a two-time All-Star. But he, against Pippen is going to win that matchup, although neither of them would be playing with 4. And then, of course, I like Vucevic, and I do think his size would be tough for someone like Rodman, who would be a mismatch for him at the center position. But we all know Rodman would find ways to get rebounds, even against some of the biggest men on the court. I will say the one thing I didn't like about this hypothetical matchup is Noah isn't on here. I mean, really, Noah should be taking Vucevic's place just because Vuce literally hasn't even been with the Bulls for 2 weeks now, and Noah is one of the greatest Bulls players of all time, and I would argue that his jersey should one day be retired in the rafters. But be that as it may, Noah wasn't included in here. Instead, we have Vucevic at the 5 on Jordan's team. Now, obviously, because this team has Michael Jordan, that gives them an incredible advantage, because for the other areas where the guys lack, Michael Jordan makes up for. And the fact that he was an elite defender, an elite scorer, passer, facilitator, he made his teammates better, and above all, he had that killer instinct and that will to win over most players. So if Jordan had to find a way to will himself to win all on his own, because he craved winning so much more than anything else, he would have found a way to get it done. However, despite having Michael Jordan on this roster, I think this team, what they lack, to an extent, is on defense. I mean, Michael Jordan was a great defender. He even won Defensive Player of the Year in the same season that he won League MVP. Heinrich was a good defender as well. I believe he made an all-defensive team one season. Luol Deng was also a good defender as well, actually. I think he was always an underrated defender in the league during his time with the Bulls. But Ben Gordon and Vucevic, obviously not areas where they excel at. And then, of course, when you look at the other end of the court on offense, I mean, they have MJ, one of the greatest scorers of all time, if not the greatest. Vucevic is another elite offensive player, but outside of that, Ben Gordon sure was a great scorer, but was often pretty inconsistent. And at his peak with the Bulls, he averaged a little over 21 points per game, but didn't really do much else beyond that. Wasn't a good rebounder, not a good passer. He committed a lot of turnovers. Kirk Heinrich, at his peak, never averaged more than 16 points a game. And again, Luol Deng, another incredible defender, but from an offensive perspective, never averaged more than 19 points per game at his peak with the Bulls, which isn't bad. I'm just trying to compare it to the other team and their offensive firepower. And again, even when you're talking about defense and Heinrich and Deng, being decent defenders, you're talking about them going up against a team that has two of the greatest defenders in NBA history in Rodman and Pippen. So honestly, this is actually a tough one, because initially when I looked at this, I said this is dumb, and any team that has the GOAT on it, they're going to win, game over. But if you really look at it further and assess the unique skill sets each player possesses, or I guess I should say what they possessed at the peak of their primes with the Bulls, it is a lot closer than you think in terms of the balance of talent between these two teams. On the one hand, you have Pippen's team that is comprised of all-star caliber players, even though I know Rodman was never an all-star with the Bulls, but he was a two-time all-star with the Pistons. MJ's team, which of course has the greatest player of all time, but a bit of a fringe all-star Luol Deng and an all-star big man. So with all this being taken into consideration, I have to say I think this is the first time ever where I have gone with the opposing team playing against Jordan. Like I said, generally, whenever I see these type of hypothetical lineups of who wins and if Michael Jordan is on it, I'm taking his team hands down. But in this one, they obviously balanced it out nicely, not to give Jordan the level of talent they gave to Pippen's team, which in my view sets the team apart. And despite MJ being the greatest player of all time, the hard-nosed competitor, that he is, that was obsessed with winning, I don't think this roster has enough talent to beat a team of MVP rows, Lavine, Butler, Pippen, and Rodman. That is a hard team to match up against, even if you try to take all of them on your own, which we saw that Jordan did a lot in his career. Let me know what you guys think, though. Which team do you think would win this matchup between these all-time Bulls teams? Are you Team Jordan or Team Pippen? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget the Bulls have a game tonight against the Raptors. I'll have a live group chat for that here on the channel as well as on the Discord. Be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in as always, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.